All right. Well, welcome to another wonderful video by me. You're probably sick of hearing my voice by now. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delve into AJAX today. And first, we're going to cover a little bit about the history of AJAX and where it came from and why we have it. And then we're going to delve into an example I've hosted or I've given you, and we're going to discuss that example as well as a PowerPoint that I've prepared. But first, let's go ahead and get into the history of AJAX. And with that, actually, Wikipedia does a pretty good job. Well, sort of. But there's a little bit more that they don't have. So let's just use that as a soundboard. And the history of it and why we have AJAX is because essentially, okay, it looks like we got the wrong one. I'm going to have to AJAX programming, duh. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the problem is that whenever you wanted data on a website to change, the whole web page would have to be redrawn. And so they wanted to have a way of getting data to basically to be able to send and receive data back and forth to a web page without the whole web page having to be re-rendered, which slowed things down immensely. And it was actually causing a lot of resource intensive problems at the server levels back in the day where things were kind of still slow and moving along. So a lot of different technologies came out to solve that problem. One of them was PHP, we're working with it. Another one was Adobe Flash and Shockwave and some of those things that you've heard of, which are just total crap. But one of the things that was the main nemesis solution to the problem was Microsoft's Active Server Directory, which was just a dang nightmare. And it's actually, there are probably still some out here, but that's so that's kind of where that happened, right about in the 1996 era where Microsoft was trying to solve that with ASP web pages, and it was a bloated nightmare. As well as Adobe Flash and all these other solutions were not really well implemented. It just, there's nothing that you could do to solve the problem at that higher level that would make it more efficient, essentially. So all these third-party pieces of the software were trying to build on top of the HTML technology. And that basically made it so they had to add more crap. And yeah, they solved some of the problems, but they caused others. And I tell you what, I tried to learn ASP and work with it. I learned it, worked with it for a while, but I decided that it was dead before it even arrived. And in fact, it didn't take too long where Google just blew everything open, and they started what we call AJAX. And I was like, it was like a godsend. It was like, oh, we'll solve this problem. We're sick of Microsoft and their crappy ASP, so let's solve this problem, and we will use a lower level, older technology to solve the problem. And so they said, okay, well, how about we do this? We already have this mechanism called the web that serves HTML pages through standard output and input that's rendered on a browser. Why don't we, instead of sending HTML, or in addition to sending HTML through that mechanism, why don't we make it so that we can send data that is as a string, like XML objects, JSON objects are all stored in a string version that you can use to go from different types of systems. for those objects, which is what was needed, especially with the web. You've got so many different things working together. We needed a standard data source that could talk to all these different technologies working together, and that's part of what XML. That's part of why XML was born, and then of course JSON came after that. So when we use AJAX, we're working with XML and JSON for exchanging data. But it could be any string. It could be any data that is in the form of ASCII code. But that's the problem with AJAX is because the string of data that is sent is through standard output, just like you would do with an echo or print from the application, but it's done in the clear. There's no security for it. So it's your job to encrypt that string. Now we're not going to get into that today. We're going to get just it working, and I want to give you a little bit of history of AJAX and get your feet a little wet on AJAX as far as from the server side of things, because it's actually stupid simple. They literally went to a lower technology to screw everybody. Adobe Flash, Shockwave, ASP, all those third-party bloated software pieces got banged out by Google because they went to the lower level technology. So now the data is not working on top of the HTML infrastructure. It's at that lower level where that HTML infrastructure is. So it's going to be just as fast. But you have responsibilities, which is the encryption of that string. And what most companies do is they will allow you to sign up for some data that you can to access, and what they do is they give you an API key, and that API key is both used for authentication and for your encryption. And I'm sure you've heard the API key if you've looked into AJAX before. But again, it's so simple that it's hard, and that's because well, we're going to get into some of the reasons that makes it difficult. Okay, so we've had a little bit of a history that, Google came out and just slammed all those third-party people right around 2005 is when that approach started, and now it's just the normal part of how we do business on the web. So let's get into some code. Let's do PowerPoint first. I did make a PowerPoint for some of the example code that we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to get in and have fun. So I'm not going to spend, well, actually this is a pretty short PowerPoint, so it's not too bad. Okay, so we're going to be using this simple AJAX code that I have available for you. That is I've already got it loaded up in here, but it's the example one. It's the example one that we're going to use for your assignment. And that one you can find, let me get in there, right there, module 11 assignment. You guys will have a video up here, but example one is what we're going to be looking at. So why don't you go ahead and download that and get it up in your IDE, and you can do that while I'm going through some of this PowerPoint and John on. Okay, so the part that runs on the server side is the data.php. Now your index is going to be the client side. So what you're doing here is you're both working both client and server all in one, all in one area. But your index.html is working on that client side of things, and the data.php is the server-sided script. Of course, they both have to be in the www folder of your web. So let's walk through some of the code, and that's going to be let's look at specifically what code are we talking about in this project that you're going to be opening up and looking at as the simple AJAX project. It looks like one of my old projects there, fire exhaust. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. So, anyways, that code is this bit right here in your example project. It's the index.html that we're looking at the code for. Now, remember, this is the client. So the client is going to request the data and then wait for the data but also have a function ready to handle the data. So what you got to do is you got to send a request to the server, and at the same time you set up a function to receive that request. So let's look at that code. So the first part here is a try, and that's going to be our data request, and that's going to be going through the lower level of just like an HTML, getting HTML tags back and forth. So once you are ready to, or once you request the data, first you say, hey, what web page or what script or program it locates the data or has the data, and that is the open statement here. We're saying data.php. Now, if this was like a website, you would have a full URL to the AJAX servers that you're looking for, and that would be right here. And then once you have that, then you send your request. So you set up your request by opening the server script that holds the script that's going to send you data through standard output by just echo or print. And then once you've set the request, you tell it, hey, this is the function I want you to run when the data comes to me. When I get the data, this is the function that needs to be run. And that's all part of the XMLHttpRequest object. And if it doesn't work, then you need to update your browser, and that's what that catch is. So that is what handles the request for the data. Just basically, hey, where is the data? It's here at this URL, which is a local file. And what function do you want to run when you get the data? Well, the get data function. So here is kind of what happens at the network monitor level. So when you get in and you ask for data.php, you can look in your network monitor, because AJAX works at that low level of your get request methods for your normal HTML access. So it's sent and received using that same mechanism. So you can see your get requests and whatnot and roll through there. Okay, so this is now, it's kind of interesting to look at this network monitor when you're playing with AJAX, but just remember that this is working at the same level that your HTML get mechanisms work for the HTML stuff. But instead of HTML that is being sent through standard output, you're going to get just a string of data that you can do whatever you want with. It doesn't have to be specific to anything. It could be a string of XML code that represents an XML object, or a string of JSON objects, or just a string of nonsense. It doesn't, but the whole idea is this is like all straight and clear, not encrypted at the at that specific level where the HTML is served to the web page, or served to the client. So at this point, at the server code, at the server level, once we get that request and that request comes in, here's the request, and here's the function that runs when the data comes in. So get the data, or request the data, get the data, request, get. Okay, that's all on the client side. Now we go at the server side, and the server side is just this data.php that's waiting for you to access it, just like you would a web page. That's what it is. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of how AJAX works. So its only job is to spew out text, and that text, instead of HTML from a file, the text from an HTML file, that text we can send it could be anything. So here's the thing is we want to specify that we want to output this to specify that this is a JSON object for the content, so that we have at least some knowledge of what that data is. And that's one thing that you do when you print your headers, is you kind of give an idea of what the data is. So we know that from the header of the standard input, and this is going to be this header, this is just print standard output. I think you could probably just do an echo here and it would work the same. But that's essentially what it is. It's just literally putting this at the top of your text that's being streamed. So the server, or for the client, what they would see is the client would see when the data came in, they would see this line, and then this object in its string form. Okay, and that's what this JSON encode does, is that it encodes it in its string form. And the reason why we want that is because what we're doing is we're taking an object in PHP that's built in PHP, and we're converting it to a JSON text-based object. So it's the description of this object, but done with all text, like XML. And this is actually an object in memory as an object instead of its form, a form of it in the form of a string. So we create the object using PHP. We instantiate the object using PHP, or we give it data or instantiate it and give it data. Then we print through standard output that information that's going to go to the client. And then what we do is we encode our object so that it converts to a JSON object. And what it'll do is it'll take this actual object in memory and give you the string version of it, so that you can grab a hold of it in a JavaScript script and convert it back to a JavaScript object in memory, instead of being the string version of that object. And that's kind of AJAX, is you take an object and you convert it to a string, shoot it out through standard output. Look, this is echo. It could be just a print too. So here's the cool funny part, is we're back to where we started on our first day. When on the first video, when I told you that everything was just print statements. It was just, the server-sided programming was just literally print statements. So that's your stream. That's your data going output through that standard output. And that's being directed, instead of going to your screen and showing up as a printed item. That's being directed to the standard out. There was one other thing I think I forgot to talk about, which is we're going to test this in a little bit, but here's the thing, is this is very difficult to debug, because you actually can't set a breakpoint here with even xedebug. It's not possible, because this is all, you can't have any kind of output other than that string output that represents a JSON script, especially when you say that the data is JSON in your header. So how would you do any kind of error or any debugging of this part of your program, which is the server-sided part serving the string as output? Because you can't literally go in here and do print statements to do debugging. That's one of my main things, is I usually go in and I'll throw in print statements, because the print statement's going to go to your client through AJAX. So it's really difficult to debug when you're doing an AJAX script. And so what you end up having to do is you can't set a breakpoint. That's not possible. Well, I'm not going to say that. It probably is, but just printing is a problem. So what you have to do is just a little trick workaround if you want to do debugging on your script, if you're having a problem with your AJAX script. And I show that in your example 2, I believe is how you do the debugging. Yeah, simple AJAX post. This is it's going to be in the data.php. Here we go. Here's how you do debugging in your AJAX server-sided script. Since you cannot just print the data, you have to specifically put your error in a file. So what you're doing is you're printing the errors to the file for your debugging. Because you can't print, any data inside of here to detect if there's something wrong with your code. So what I do is I'll throw in, if I want to see if the code is getting to this line, like line 19, and I'll put a little print statement here, like echo hello world. That's how I like to debug some of these types of things that aren't very friendly with breakpoints and whatnot. But you can't do that because that's not something that's going to the console. It's actually going to your client because that's who's requesting it. Your client's requesting it. If you were to run this, as a client, well, let's not even get into that. So this is how you would actually debug your AJAX server-sided script. This one's a little bit more complicated than what we're going to do. This is where you can send data back and forth from the client to and from the client. It's both directions, I believe. Yes, it's both directions. So you guys can play with this one if you want to. Just know that both directions are possible with AJAX, from the data JSON objects from the server to the client, from the client to the server, back and forth, back and forth. You can do it all you want. Okay, so that is that bit of it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just do a test and we're going to modify. We're going to get this to work. And I've actually got this running. It should be running in my www folder. I haven't actually tested the code, but I think what I can do is I can just say play, and it should copy over, and let's make sure it's in the www folder. Oh, and I don't even have WAMP started, so I'm going to do that. So I got WAMP going, okay, and we're working on getting this to work. WAMP is going. What needs to go next? We're just testing it to get it to work. That's our goal. Oh, checking the www folder. Okay, we're going to make sure that when I did that play, it copied everything over. I've got it set in my project to copy over to the www folder from where I'm actually doing the work, which is on the desktop. So let's make sure it did the copy over before we do any more testing. Go into our www. Which one are we working? This one might not be in there. Simple AJAX. Okay, well, you know what? Let's do this. Let's just go back here. Here's a nice little thing that you can do. You can right click on it and go to properties for your project. And then you can say, hey, copy from source folder to another location. And that's where you can choose your www. In case you need to reset that up, specifically if you're working in other directories like I am on my project folder. It says desktop simple AJAX, but I'm having it copy to the www for testing. Okay, now I can test this and I can hit play, and what is going to happen is index.php is going to run. And let's see what we have. Okay, so let's look at what actually ended up happening. We have the AJAX content available to us, and we got our hello world, our first name and our last name. let's just test this. John Doe. Let's do a save all. Go back to here. Go back to our web and do a refresh. John Doe. Cool. Okay. So here's what happened. Index came up. So index came up, and it ran this code right here. And what it said is, open up data.php and give me what you have. And that is just like opening up a website in your browser and rendering the HTML tags. So we're saying open that, run that file, and that file, when it's run, get ready for the or take the standard output from that data and run this function to receive the data. This function then ran, and it made sure that, hey, did we actually do well on setting up the request for our information, which is a status of 200 and a ready state of 4. And if that is true, then you've received your response. And that get data function will keep looking and running until you get the response, or it times out. Once that response happens, then the first thing you do is, oh, I've got from my HTTP request. That is the object that you created that does all of your AJAX methods, and or holds all the data, the request and the data for accessing AJAX is all in that object. So you instantiate it here, and you run through it. And then when you get up to the get data function, that means then that since this HTTP request object is declared at file scope, it's still alive and also been instantiated when the get data function runs, which means then that if the status is 200 and we are ready at status of 4, then we have data to grab, and that data is going to come through the response text of our HTTP request. And then what that is then done is converted back to a JSON string object. It's not an object until you convert it to a JavaScript object, but it's a JSON string object. And so we parse that information for that JSON object. Then we say, okay, well, print the data that we got. And this is the header. We get all the headers for the data. And that is also what is being printed, is the header stuff. And that is actually what is created, the header stuff. The header that you get is created right here. That's what's output. It's just part of the object that we're using to work with AJAX. So this is actually really stupid simple. They actually went to a lower technology to solve a higher tech problem. Everybody that went high tech with this solution died miserably. Adobe Flash, Shockwave, ASP, and there's some out there that I probably haven't even heard of. And AJAX now rules the roost because they solved the problem with a lower level, more efficient solution using something that we already have. And that's AJAX, guys. There's more to it. I mean, we can go on and on about it, and sending data back and forth, but literally it's just you're printing the data to standard output, and that data is being directed to your script on the client side through the HTTP request object. Okay. All right, here is our network monitor. When we post, we access the data. That is what the code here is for. It looks like I am going through this PowerPoint with the more difficult code back and forth assignment, where you can send data back and forth to the server. So you may want to review this and play with it a bit if you want to do sending, or want to know how to send and receive information. So you can send an object from the client to the server script or the server, or you can send an object or data from the server back to the client. So this is an example of that, a little bit higher level example, and then of course the debug that you need for that. So go ahead and play around with it some. Yeah, I think that's about it. So you can actually, this assignment is actually easy. We just did it. So this is what I want to see for your screenshot. Maybe do something like change the data, or maybe add another object. That would be a good exercise, is add another object just to play with it. In fact, maybe let's add an extra credit for that. Yes. Extra credit for sending two objects. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to put that in. We're going to end the video now, and you guys will see a video up here in your module. Thank you very much.